Howdy everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name's Jake and I am a farrier, but today we're going to be taking a little bit of a different direction with the farrier videos, and that's because I'm going to be building handmade horseshoes. So here I'm going to show you guys how to take regular steel bar stock and turn it into a functioning horseshoe. Now, if you're interested in learning more about horseshoeing, I recommend you go and check out some of my videos after this one. Alright, so to get into it, I am using 3/4 by 5/16 hot rolled steel bar stock. And I didn't have the chance to film this, but I actually pre-cut these lengths on my bandsaw before getting to work here. Now typically when I make handmade shoes, I am custom making them for a specific horse, and in this case I'm making these for my horse Bella. So I've already measured her feet, and I know that I need 13 inches of stock for her fronts and 12 inches of stock for her hinds. So I've cut these steel bars down to that length. Now I'm going to build fullered handmaids. And you can build non-fullered handmaids, of course, they're just called plain stamps. But I want to show you guys the fullering process, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm using this wedge device to create an indent or a crease in the center of my stock, and depending on what kind of stock you're using or what size of shoe you're going to build, you might offset that a little bit, but I'm going to put my fuller right in the center of the stock, as you can see me doing here. And when that steel is bright hot, I need that steel as hot as I can get it to do this effectively. I'm going to work my way down in a straight line, tapping my hammer in kind of medium taps, creating that indent as I go. Now the purpose of the fuller in the shoe is to give the horse traction. That fuller crease will fill up with dirt, and that dirt creates friction on the ground as that horse walks. So it provides it a little more stability. Now here I'm going to get into shaping the shoe. I'm going to create my toe bend. And to do that, I'm going to just make kind of a swooping right angle to start. And once I've done that, I'm in a position to start forming my heels. And I start that by doing what's known as checking the heels. I'm closing in the insides a little bit, tightening it up, and then I'm going to round out the ends of that stock, which is just a cut off square at the moment. Now the main reason I'm doing this is so that I don't have any sharp edges, but a horse's heels also come to kind of a tapered end. So to match that, I want to kind of create a tapered end in my shoes. Now here's another example of me finding that toe bend, creating that angle, and setting myself up. The reason I do that first is so that the other half of my stock is actually out of the way when I go to check my heels. Now throughout this whole process, you're going to see me leveling the stock and flattening it out. And that's because if I have it all uneven and unbalanced, it makes it really hard to make effective decisions about where things need to change. It's really hard to see where your fuller needs to be, how your heels might need to change, your nail holes, if you're working with uneven stock. So I'm constantly leveling as I go, reflattening that shoe. Now here's a good time to mention something about my shaping hammer. If you look closely, you'll notice that the head actually has two different sides to it. It's got a flattening edge and a rounding edge. And I use that rounding edge for doing things like creating my toe bend, right? Just making big round changes to the stock. But for things like leveling, if I want flat level hits with my hammer, I'm going to use that flat edge. Now here's where you're going to start seeing a change between the front shoe and the hind shoe, because I'm going to go about it a little bit differently how I shape these over the horn. For my hind shoe here, I'm going to build a house backwards. I'm going to start out by building a roof, and then I'm going to add on some walls. For my front shoe, I'm going to imagine a circle with about the bottom fifth taken out of the line and then squish it a little bit. And that'll kind of give you an idea of the difference, kind of the mindset to have when you're going about shaping these. Now here you can kind of see what I was talking about with the front shoe. I start out with pretty linear straight lines in my stock, and I need to form that into a round, smooth, uniform, all the way around bend in my shoe. Now this form isn't completely shaped up yet, but here you've got a pretty good idea of what a front shoe should look like. Now with my hind, I've established the basic shape of my toe, and I'm going to next establish my quarters by bringing in those walls onto my roof like I was talking about earlier. I'm going to bring those heels in hard on an angle and add some walls to the bottom of our house. So now that I've got the basic shape of my shoes down, it's time to start punching some nail holes. So I'm going to use a tool called a 4-punch. Now whatever 4-punch you use, the point needs to be dialed into whatever specific size and type of nail you intend to use. For handmade shoes, I like to use MX50s, it's a great nail. So my 4-punch matches that same nail head. Now in that last clip you saw me going through with my 4-punch and making an initial mark, just establishing where I want those nail holes to be. Typically I'll go through with a center punch and my ruler and measure it all out, but I can also just kind of use my handle to estimate where I want those to end up. And if I need to go back and adjust a little bit, I can. That's why I make an initial mark. Now here I'm going to use my 4-punch and my hammer to take those holes all the way down. Now the idea with the 4-punch is not to punch all the way through the stock, it's to punch almost to the bottom of where I want that hole to be. And then I'll use my pritchel to finish it the rest of the way. If I drive my 4-punch too deep, I'll create what's called frog eyes in the stock, and it'll expand outward in a circular form. So to prevent this, I try to make a certain number of concise, level hits in every single hole. So for me, I'll make 3 heavy delivered hits in every single hole, and if I need to, I can go back and hit each one another time if that doesn't take it quite deep enough. And that way, I don't overstep and drive my holes too deep with my 4-punch. Now I think this is a good time to bring up heat, and might sound obvious, but heat is your friend here. Heat makes everything easier in forging. The colder your steel gets, the more difficult everything becomes. So the more I can get done while my steel is hot, the more efficient of a blacksmith I can be. Now an exception to that is when I have to go back through and pritchel my nail holes. After I have 4-punched my nail holes and have them all right where I want them, I'm going to let that shoe cool down almost all the way. If I try to pritchel my nail holes while the shoe is still hot, I'll have a blowout of steel out the bottom. So I've got to let that shoe cool for a little while, then I can go back through and I'm going to pound my pritchel all the way through to finish off that hole. Now the same thing goes for this as with 4-punching. I don't want to pound my pritchel too deep all the way through, otherwise my nail hole will become too big and the blade of my nail will be able to rock around in that hole. I want to just barely send that pritchel through the bottom so that my hole is exactly the right size for the blade of the nail. Now here, this shoe is still pretty roughed out, but it's the perfect time to check my nail hole. So I'm going to get a nail and do a little drop test and see how that fits in there. Make sure that my fuller isn't closed up too tight and that that nail just smoothly drops down into every single hole, that it doesn't get hung up in the nail head or in the blade. And you can see that little tapered edge sticking out above the stock, and that is exactly what I'm looking for, just that little bit of the nail head sticking out above while the rest of it's descended below into my nail hole. So now it's time to do a little bit of cleanup work, and just a note guys, I'm not masterful at this by any means. I've got little frog eyes around my nail holes, I've got hammer marks, little bits of slag. So I'm going to go through with an old rasp here and just try and get all these marks level, take out a bunch of uneven material on the surface of the shoe. On the inside here I'm going to use a round file, and it's actually a good thing to do with your handmaids in general, to take a little bit of that inside edge off like I'm doing here to relieve sole pressure on the bottom of the horse's foot. Now here where you can see the metal is shiny, I've removed some discrepancies, some uneven material in the metal. Like I said, I'm still getting better at learning how to perfectly check my heels with my hammer, but what I can do is come through with this rasp and take all the sharp edges off just like I've been doing and make it nice and smooth and uniform all the way around. So to finally clean up my work, I'm going to heat up the shoe to bright hot and take it out. I'm going to brush it with a steel brush as fast and as hard as I can all over. I'm just going to hit that thing as hard as I can with this brush. Get all the edges, both sides, every direction that I can as the shoe is cooling down. And that's going to give me a nice smooth finish on these shoes like you see here. Now I'll also go back and redo this when I shape the shoes to the horse, but when I make handmaids I like to bevel the edges, just makes them look nice and clean and finished up. There you have it guys, that is how I build my handmade folded horseshoes, and now I get to go shoe my horse with them. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like and subscribe so that you don't miss the amazing content that we've got coming your way. And hit me up in that comment section if you have any questions, as well as check out the other horseshoeing videos on this channel if you would like to learn more. But I hope to see you guys in the next video, and until then, adios.